set.
We all set? Okay, welcome everybody. So we have actually two meetings tonight, but this first meeting is the Boards and Commissions Cabinet. And our first topic of discussion is affordable housing presentation by Central Massachusetts Regional Commission. So, Bill, you want to open us up here and tell us where we are?
So, good evening, everybody, and appreciate you all coming. I'm going to basically give an overview of the housing situation, what our purpose is here tonight, and after that, I'll take a pause and ask for any question or clarifications that you might need, and then we'll open it up to the direct purpose of tonight's meeting. So why are we here? Well, my job as the coordinator, and you'll excuse me if I use my notes because I have a lot of details and I want to stay straight on topic. A lot of details to get through. So my job as the coordinator for affordable housing is to do research, gather information, and the charge of the Community Preservation Committee is to promote, support, and create affordable housing. So my job is to move initiatives forward for those purposes. And I see my job as finding the highest and best use of the CPA funds that are dedicated to housing to meet the town's immediate and long-range needs. And at this juncture in the project that we're considering, I, as the coordinator, need the support, expertise, and collective wisdom of all the people in this room. I can't really make any decisions, so I'm relying on folks to help me out where my knowledge and experience is not sufficient. So the goal for tonight's meeting is for me to provide information that you'll need to make your considerations, try to move the town toward a consensus as to how to approach this project, and then help define the RFP that we're developing. So starting off with what you need to know, I'd like to talk briefly about the housing status for Mendon. Mendon is like a lot of other rural towns in Massachusetts. Our housing stock is primarily large single-family homes. That constitutes 93% of our housing units. We have a very limited commercial tax base, so we have a lot of tax burden on the homeowners. We've experienced a growth spurt in housing units in the past couple of decades, and the reality is that we have very few options for any kind of mobility for downsizing or folks wanting to enter into the housing market here. A word about the trends and forecast. Our current population, being around 6,000, is expected to grow modestly between now and 2030 by about 10%. However, the senior population, which is currently about 11% of Mendon's population, is expected to experience 170% growth, an increase of 1,100 people. And we all know that our population is aging. Kevin's signaling more. Too low. These projections that I'm quoting were from a few years ago, so it doesn't surprise me that you say that. At the same time, the trend in household size, the number of occupants per housing unit, has been trending downward steadily. And the numbers aren't impressive. They're like 2.9 occupants in 2000, projected to go down to 2.4 in 2030. But it does make a big difference. And that is driven by both preference, as a lot of people just prefer smaller housing units, and necessity, economics and people moving in, even with people moving in together. Householders who are age 60 and above are going to go from 28% of the households to 50% of the households. And householders who are now 55 and over are going to need 210 fewer units of housing, which means that about 23 single-family homes will come back onto the market, almost like a surplus. So while on one hand, we have not much for other housing options, large single-family homes will be in less demand. So our housing stock may have suited us well in the past. It doesn't really suit us now, and the trend is that it's going to be more extreme in the future. So just a word about affordability. In Mendon, 24% of households right now are considered low-income households. That means that they fall below what DHCD, Department of Housing Community Development in Massachusetts, and HUD, US HUD, that's what the standard that they call the 80% of average median income. And so that's 24% of the households in Mendon would be considered low income. And households that are considered cost burdened, and cost burdened means that people are spending more than 30% of their income on housing costs. Cost burdened households, 39% of renters, 27% of homeowners. So those figures are not, things to write down, but when you think about the impact of them, it's pretty amazing. So just to summarize, we have, again, aging population, decreasing household size, sales prices for homes that are rising faster than incomes are rising, buying becoming too expensive for current residents, very few options for downsizing or entering the market, a small percentage of rental units, and a lot of people who work here that can't really afford to live here. Just a quick note on community values and how it relates to what we want to do about housing. It's very strong feeling that people want to maintain the character of this town. And another one is that they feel strongly about staying in control of whatever development comes along. So our needs are for smaller housing units, to offer options for those who want to age in place. That's a term for, it's self-explanatory, but it's a term for designing households so that as you age, you can stay in your home and stay in your town. Provide options for younger families and singles. Provide some rental options. Improve affordability. As I said, preserve the character of the town, and any development needs to fit that character. And then other goals would be any development that we do should have a net positive fiscal impact, putting property back on the tax rolls and the boost to the local economy. A goal of making new units ADA compliant to make them fit with low impact development principles, which generally will reduce operating costs to the town and work towards the 10% goal that the state has for affordable housing units. And then integrate all of our housing initiatives with the master planning goals. So that's a real quick overview of where we're at, the situation that we're facing. And I'd like to just take a quick break if there's any questions or clarifications needed there. So we can pretty much, I'm assuming that we can accept all that as just fact and, agreed upon assumptions. So I'm just going to quickly describe the project site that we're considering. It's shown up on this chart. I'm sorry I can't really tilt this chart. It's because of our two-legged tripod. It's aimed for the TV camera right now. But this is the property that's down by, right beside the senior center in the highway department. And the parcel that we're considering, I'll move this in a minute. The parcel that we're considering is on the lower left of this chart. It'd be, if you were on Providence Street looking at the senior center, it would be to the left and slightly behind. And it's 3.2 acres of this land. This land is a small parcel of the land that was purchased with 100% purchased with CPA money, which means that can only be used for open space, recreation, and affordable housing. And because it was bought with 100% of CPA money, or entirely with CPA money, any housing that goes there needs to be affordable by CPA standards, by their measures. So we're talking about the 3.2 acres. Forget about everything that's drawn on there except for the area where it is. So who would be served by any housing that is put there? I have to tell you, it's us. There are people in this room I know would benefit from it. There's a lot of people that we know. And this is housing for people that have, incomes. And to give you an idea, low income for a senior, single, would be $84,000. Or a household of four, $120,000. So I want to touch upon the grant that we have, and then we're going to bring CMRPC up to the table. I applied for a grant from Department of Housing and Community Development to explore the possibility of putting housing on this site, and it has 4 components. One is outreach and community engagement, which I consider in some ways to be almost the most important piece of the grant. There's a component for engineering, and this is both to inform us as we prepare the RFP, and also to inform any bidders on that RFP so they'll have some confidence as to what they're bidding on. Third component is town approvals, which would be stemming from the results of this meeting. And the fourth is to prepare the RFP itself. So I'm going to ask Ron and or Chris to come on up from CMRPC and explain to us the outreach and community engagement portion.
Yeah. Bill, just
Yes.
a couple of questions from the board.
Please.
Let's go.
I had 2 real quick ones. So you mentioned before you were talking about the definition of low income and its relation, and it was related to median income, but median income doesn't mean in Mendon, right? What's the geographical area of median?
For us, it's,
For us.
well, HUD divides it up into different areas, and it's eastern Worcester County. And that number from Mendon is 120,200.
Eastern Worcester County, okay, cool.
Yep.
And then the other one was, what's our current affordable housing rate?
Percentage?
Yeah, because you said our target was 10, where are we at now?
Right, about 1.9.
Thank
We
you.
lost units when a portion of the last development was allowed to go conventional. We did have 41 units on the books, now we have 30.
Thank you.
I didn't give you all the income numbers because it's just not worth it this juncture talking about all of them, but you get the idea that we're talking about people that have significant incomes to be able to even qualify for this, to be able to afford this type of housing.
Well, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to talk here. My name is Ron Barron. I'm an associate planner with the Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission. This is my colleague, Chris Ryan. We've been working on this project since spring of this year. What CMRPC was asked to do with this is we were asked to come in and work on the community outreach and the RFP portions of it particularly, and also to provide a certain level of technical assistance that may be required for some of the other things. Just wanted today to talk very quickly about the work that we've done to date, where we're going to be going with this project, and what questions still need to be answered, hopefully through this meeting and through over the next few weeks. We started work back in the spring doing project planning. We had begun in the early summer to work on a visual preference survey, which the board members actually had an opportunity to take part in. The point of that was to reach out to members of the community and to try to assess what type of housing the community would find most pleasurable and what kind they would find least desirable. And we had a process that looked at several images that were put up online that was in 2 different categories. We got about a little more than 100 responses for that, most of which were immediately following the meeting that we had. So clearly it was a lot of people watching this the night that it was broadcast that came on and were able to take the survey. From then, we've been providing some technical assistance with the engineering piece to Bill, and we've been working on turning the results from the visual preference survey into a design guideline guidebook that we're going to include with the RFP that is going to be a final output of this. And one of the goals of the design guidelines is to try to translate the feedback that we've gotten from the community and not necessarily be prescriptive in how we want the developers to build the housing, but to let them know that these are the standards that the town has set forth and to guide whatever proposal that we end up getting from this. Sorry about reading from my notes here, but I didn't have time to memorize them. So from this, the visual preference survey, we were able to digest a few overarching principles that we are using to guide the development of the design guidelines. The first one was preserving the character of the town of Mendon. This was extremely important. People who responded seemed to want housing that was consistent with the types of housing and the types of architecture that's present in town. The design aesthetic was something that we got a lot of feedback on. Definitely, people tended to favor buildings that were smaller in scale, that were designed to be modest, well integrated with the existing fabric of the community, and well integrated with the natural environment. And also environmental performance was one of the other key ones that we looked at, that people strongly responded to building designs that included a robust open space component and didn't detract from the natural environment that was sitting in. And given the type of parcel that we're looking at, we think this is a really important piece because there's so much open space. Its potential for integration with the senior center is really high. So this is something that we really want to focus on in the design guidelines. From there, we are working on developing also the request for proposals language. This is going to include the legal language, the basic design guidelines, the criteria that we would use that the town would use for selecting a developer, as well as a process for grading and selecting any proposals that come in. We're hoping to have this done by maybe by the end of this month, maybe early in January would be sort of a good date for that. And finally, the last thing that we wanted to mention is that for the questions that we still need to get out of this meeting is there's a couple of things that we need to talk about. There needs to be a decision made by the town as to whether or not the development is going to be a rental or an ownership, or how that's going to end up playing out, and how the town is willing to go through get around the current zoning that's there, whether or not it's going to require getting a variance or working as a friendly 40B process with the town. And so with that, if you had if anyone had any questions, otherwise I would turn it back over to Bill and let him continue on with his part of the presentation.
Just very quickly, Bill, we were talking about 1.9% is our current ratio right now. After this project, what do we get up to?
Well, that would depend on how many units are built.
Mm-hmm.
We have a goal right now of about 220 units. So to make any significant progress toward that, in conjunction with having a production plan in place, could even provide us with safe harbor against any hostile 40Bs if we, I mean, I know I'm not giving you any numbers there, but it really depends on what we decide to do for a development.
So 220 units gets us to our 20%?
That would get us to 10%.
I'm sorry, 10%?
Currently,
Sorry, thank you.
which is a moving target as population and households increase, yeah.
Okay, but the markups that we've got so far for what would potentially go here adds how many to that 220?
Well, okay, so
Just the thumbs up.
let me address that question in my next
Okay.
segment here.
Okay.
Were there other things that you wanted to ask?
It was more around process, but I think you answered that question. So there's two action items that we're currently faced with right now, which is a decision on what the town wants to rent to own, and how the town gets around current zoning on the parcel down there.
Right, that's
Do we
really
do
the-
a 40B, or do we do something else? Okay,
Right.
I just want to make sure.
So I'm going to
clear on
address that just for a second, too.
Okay.
So let me quickly just say something about the engineering.
I'm sorry, I have
Go ahead,
one more
please.
question for Ron, right?
Yeah.
So what's a typical response rate on these visual preference stories? I mean, 100 out of 6,000 is pretty, I don't know, to me, I don't feel like that's a statistically relevant sample.
It's not an overwhelming number. It really depends on how the survey is advertised and how it goes out. It's not an overwhelming response rate for sure, but it does provide enough information for us to be able to try to get some broad generalizations, largely because not a lot of the responses, nothing was terribly shocking that we got out of it.
Yeah. Okay, but still, just like, what are you used to roughly for a response rate?
Well, it's very,
1%,
very wild.
5%.
1,
It's wild all over
2%
the
can
place.
happen. I think the highest that I've seen in one of the projects we've done in recent years was under 10%.
Okay, so that would be high.
That would be generally high for these types of things. And it's important to know that these aren't scientific surveys. These are trying to take the general temperature of a populace.
I get that.
So,
Thank you.
So you're happy with the results? Just off of getting 100 right out of the chute, right after the meeting, you were happy with that?
well, obviously, whenever we do something like this, the more information we get, the better it would be. But with that type of response rate, we were satisfied that we could get enough information from it to make some generalizations that I think
And that's
are
what I was trying to tease out.
Yeah, it was time delimited, certainly. I think if we kept it open, and as Ron was alluding to, if we marketed it more aggressively, used a lot of different social media and other ways of really pushing it, I'm sure that we could have bumped that up a little bit. But for what we did for it and the time that it was out there, I think it's a pretty good response rate.
And more importantly, I just want to note that it's enough information for you guys to be able to do your job.
Right.
Yes, it definitely was.
All right.
So as far as the grant goes, I just wanted to mention that the engineering component will actually be completed in the next few weeks. But the preliminary anticipated results, I guess you'd say, is that we know that the soils on this property are very good. They're considered like Hinckley Soils A, which is, really good news. And the engineers, reluctant, I would say, at this juncture, but put forward an estimate that this could support up to 88 bedrooms, which is a significant number. Without going over the 10,000 gallon septic threshold. There again, I'll yield to expertise in the room about that when it comes time to discuss that. So since we need a mix of number of bedrooms, you need at least 10% 3-bedroom units to satisfy DHCD. I could see as many as 50 units going in there, a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, predominantly 2 bedrooms and with some single and 3 bedrooms mixed in. So that answers,
Might make a 2% dent.
Yeah.
Percentage point dent.
that's a huge,
Yeah, that's good.
right? So the meat and potatoes is really about, tonight, is about how we deal with those two big issues. I just want to say about the RFP, as Ron said, you can't be prescriptive. So the idea here is that we are in control of this project. We own the land. We have the subsidies. We control the destiny of it. And we can determine what we want, and we can define the attributes of the housing that goes there, and then let a developers come forward with their own design concepts for us to evaluate, and then select what we like. And so the big questions, as I see it for tonight, is there's two big ones. One is, do we do a project for ownership housing or rental housing? My recommendation would be to try to go for rental housing if it's financially viable. Rental housing needs scale, and this is enough units probably to make it financially feasible. That might not be the case on subsequent opportunities that we have. And then the other question is whether we want to invoke a friendly 40B or not. And as Chris pointed out today, it's 240B or not 240B. So either one of those options, thank you, Chris. Thanks, Shakespeare. Either one of those options is actually okay, but I would strongly prefer that we go without a 40B. That just basically means that we find a path to give us the density and all the other allowances that we need to be able to make this work with the same privileges that a 40B developer could come in with a comprehensive permit.
Bill, can I ask a question real quick?
Please.
And if I'm out of order, please let me know.
You're out of order, sir.
Thank you. Okay, I'll reserve it for later. No, I just wanted to know, given the restrictions on the amount of units that could be placed on the site, provided a septic solution were provided, would there be any possibility that you could write within the RFP that a developer could propose a mini package plant to bump units higher?
Thank
Is
you
that
for-
something that would be appropriate or desirable?
I think that's a question for the town, but I'm really glad you brought that up.
Could you restate the question in
Well-
layman's terms, so I didn't follow that?
Yeah, well, and Chris and I believe, and others had talked about the possibility of creating a septic system that could actually have capacity for other development in that immediate area, correct? We talked about that?
Well, I think,
Being either a mixed-use development or a Phase B with using more of the land
but
here.
it would probably have to be a mini, like a packaged sewer plant. It would be a smaller than that would serve the town center, but it would serve immediate development in the area. And certainly technology's out there to do that kind of thing, but obviously that would allow for more density, it would allow for more units, certainly allow you to get closer to your 10%, but, obviously that's a big decision. And if you're willing to entertain developer proposals that in a creative way could get additional units, then obviously that kind of flexibility built into the RFP, you might get some proposals that, propose septic tank solutions. You might have maybe another developer that might say, I could get 100 units if you allow me to build a packaged sewer plant
Yeah.
on the site.
I think from my standpoint, it's hard for me to discern which way to go without having some order of magnitude on that. What is the potential net gain on something like that? So that, how could we even make that judgment at that point?
Well, would the question be whether the town would just want to even entertain that right now?
Well, obviously, a lot of different things are in play. Number one, is that a question that could be asked of the engineer right now to supplement his work before he's finished? Number two is
Yes.
the scale obviously could be larger. You could have more units. You could have more of a visual impact. Fiscal impact may be better for the town if the mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units is bumped up. So certainly you could have more tax revenue that comes out of this as well.
I just want to restate what I think your question to him was, because I'm still not quite, I think I get it. So you're really saying, would we entertain, I'm going to say this really dumbed down, entertain oversizing some type of septic system that allows future expansion? That's really what you're asking, right?
In a sense, yes.
Yeah, it's more of a
Building
waste treatment.
excess infrastructure.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a
okay, that's
waste
what I
treatment
thought.
facility or something like that.
Thank you.
That allows you to be able to do that. So a few questions out there, Kevin?
Surprised nobody's pointed out, but it's a very important discussion. If you have home ownership, only the affordable units count. If you have a rental development, all units count. So if you build 40 apartments, you get 40 housing units counting as affordable. If you build it where it's owned, and only 3 of them are affordable, you only get 3 more units.
Yep.
That's a factor you need to consider in making that decision.
So generally speaking, you're correct. But since this land was purchased entirely with CPA money, every housing unit on that property is going to be affordable, at least to CPA income limitations. But we could have a mix. Go ahead.
Follow-up question is, unless you have a DHCD subsidy, will the state count it as affordable?
Yes, the subsidy can come from the town, it can come from the state, and there will be DHCD involvement anyway. But we're already subsidizing this project by offering the land, either on a 99-year lease or some option, or we could convey the land and it would still have the affordability restriction, would live on in perpetuity. But every housing unit that's developed on that property will be deed restricted
I've worked
in affordability.
with the private, ones I know the
Yep.
rental versus own is a big factor.
Right. What Kevin's pointing out is when you have a rental development, if 25% of the rentals are affordable, they all count on the subsidized housing inventory.
Yeah, for instance, Milford is pursuing a friendly 40B with a developer with 162 units, all of which would then be counted.
Yeah, just do me a favor, I'd like to keep the questions clear. I'm gonna try to avoid going with the back and forth discussions, just so we can keep things moving forward. Go ahead, Bill.
What's the size of the property building casino planning board?
The parcel that we're considering right now is just 3.2 acres. But there is more room on that property that might be suitable for housing. I was, really thinking that we would consider that later. Right now, it's really important for me to get a winning project that the townspeople see as a win-win-win on all accounts. But we could certainly expand our thinking if we so choose.
Bill,
Just looking at it from a strictly building.
okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
We're gonna have to leapfrog for this. We have height restrictions in town, number one, so can't be any higher than 35 feet. And these are things that generally don't get wavered, either by zoning or planning. So, we've been talking about doing an affordable housing bylaw for a while. And this might be a good time to try and put something in place for it.
Yep.
Yep.
Can I just respond to that real quickly?
Yeah, sure.
I would say that, since the architectural character is so important, we're looking for something that really looks small scale, even if it's a multifamily building or attached units. So I can't even envision anything that would,
I'm just assuming by the numbers you put out, you were planning on the 3.2 acres. I don't see the setbacks and how you're going to achieve all that.
I would assume that the engineering study is gonna take our current bylaws into consideration, correct?
They'll be looking for waivers or ZBA relief.
Right, but I would assume that none of that's gonna happen without the planning boards.
Okay,
And,
correct.
The-
I'm trying to get on the front of this.
yeah, I got you.
the current phase of engineering is basically very limited by budget to just try to figure out what the capacity is over there.
I can certainly have a planning's engineer step in. That'd probably be a good barometer to get us where we're at.
Yeah. Bill, do me a favor, can you just explain the difference between affordable housing and 40B? Because I think there's some confusion about what that is.
40B is the statute that Massachusetts put into place, I think it's about 45 years old. It's very flawed. What's that? It's very flawed, it's very complicated, but it basically promotes affordable housing by encouraging developers to seek comprehensive permits that allow them to bypass certain zoning regulations and get streamlined permitting as long as they provide a certain amount of affordable housing. So 40B is just the statute, and when we're referring to a friendly 40B, excuse me, we're talking about the town being the entity that moves the initiative forward rather than an outside party coming in and invoking 40B. Is that?
Yeah, yep. I just wanted to make sure folks understood that. Mr. Rudden?
Kevin Rudden, with my water commission hat on. Where would the entrance to this be in terms of proximity to the existing well for the senior center?
Can you point out, isn't that well, here's the senior center right here. Isn't the well for the senior center right back here somewhere? Right here.
So we're more than 100 feet away from there.
We're over here, so I'd say, yeah, this is a 100-foot scale right here.
Okay, and have you given any thought to the cost of the public water supply that you'll have to put in to serve those units?
I don't think they've done that with engineering, because that was my next question, was public water supply needs a 200-foot diameter.
Yeah, the
You
three public
can't
water,
build- you can't do anything on that project.
the three public water supplies we have now are under consent decree with the state because they don't measure to current standards. And a previous board of selectmen signed a consent decree with the DEP that they're accepting me less than 200 feet circumference. So what happens now is when you build that, you need a well of capacity to serve all the units with no building at least with 100 feet diameter around it, possibly 200 feet to service all the units. And 3.2 acres, I'm just questioning if you have enough land to do that.
You know, I think, I appreciate this round of questioning, and I think it's important discussions, but when I think about the process, you know, clearly we have professional engineers that are supposed to be able to figure all this out, right? So the engineers understand the rules, the regulations, and everything else. I think the pertinent discussion tonight is, you know, how do we move forward? And what do we plan on doing down there? So I think the important questions of really what we're trying to tease out is rent versus own, et cetera, et cetera. 1 second, Chris. And the zoning, and what do we yield from that? And then once we do that, let the engineers start playing around with it and telling us what we can and can't do and what the obstacles are. I think that we're just getting way ahead of the horse path. I think these are valuable inputs, you know, but I think in respect to time, because we're going to have another meeting here, and I'm guarantee more folks are going to have questions, is if you have any particular questions around water or anything else like that, then I would say that that you would email them to Bill, and we'll get them there. So, anyways, okay, go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say that in some sense, the RFP process itself is going to be an opportunity for you to receive feedback from interested developers who may propose their own solutions and may propose ideas that we may not think of. Not necessarily that you have to accept those proposals, but it's sort of like a job applicant coming in for a job, and you interview them and you ask questions. What would you do in this situation if you had this office issue? And you take in their feedback and you say, well, I'm not really interested in that candidate, but they had a good idea. So it's possible that either from a zoning standpoint, a technical standpoint, or other potential perceived limitations, there may be some talented engineering firms out there that could really put their mind to something like this and propose some solutions that might be interesting. In the end, there may not be any bidders, but the process itself, instead of spending the town's money on those engineering questions, why not let the proposers spend their money?
Okay.
Makes sense. I have a quick question, Bill. Who is the owner if we rent?
Well,
Please tell me it's not the town of Mendon.
well, the town of Mendon could give a 99-year lease on the land without being in the real estate business. In other words, a rental property manager, management company tied to the developer or the
But we'd still
developer.
own the property.
We can own the land or we can convey it. If we choose to own it, there might be advantages to, suppose that somebody goes belly up and now if we own the land now, we would have control over its future once again. But I'm not suggesting, of course, that the town get into the real estate management business right. And for an ownership scenario, we would, more than likely, we would convey the land because that affordability restriction would go along and we would just let go of that piece of land in terms of town ownership of the land itself.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I'd have to see exactly how that would work.
Yeah, I think there's more details.
It's a little scary, yeah.
Oh, I'm sure there's.
Which part's scary,
positives
please?
and
Just
negatives.
being a landlord, I mean, that's the last thing we need.
Would you describe that, Chris, as being a landlord? I would think of it, we're basically just doing a lease on the land itself.
Yeah, ground lease is not going to really put the town in any kind of day-to-day management of any real estate. It's just basically going to maintain that overall control in terms of ownership, but the actual day-to-day will be whoever takes on that 99-year lease. They're essentially the managing owners of the property. But, when that lease is done, it's either renegotiated or it
Well, they
goes
may
back
be
to the town.
responsible, but we're still gonna be accountable if technically the town of Mendon owns the land. I'd wanna see the details on that, I don't know that, yeah.
Certainly it's simpler if you
Not
convey it.
uncommon.
Oh, I'm sure it's not, but, yeah,
It just adds another component,
yeah.
that's all. Bill, do you have a question?
No, I was just, I'm trying to wrap my head around this, how we're gonna be able to get this done on that particular piece of property. I mean, having been a resident of this town my whole life, I've seen this town go down this road many times. And I say the same thing every time, let's think out of the box. Before we throw cards in one location, let's think if there's any other, maybe the corners are better. I know people are looking to build that commercial, but you're gonna get significant revenue off of a tax burden, putting that many units that we're talking about, or considerably more on that corner. And I'll tell you right now, that's a difficult corner for people who are gonna look to come in commercially because of grade. It would be probably more suitable for this type of project, and it'd be much larger, and we'd have the room and capacity to do much more there. So before we just decide that we're gonna pick a piece of land and we're gonna drill everything down to that one piece of property, or use the back even, if someone gets enough units back there, they may be willing to do the crossing over the river. I mean, that's an expensive crossing, probably $500,000, but if they get enough units, I mean, just to say we're gonna take I see a problem with 3.2 acres from planning. I mean, this is a town that has no water and no sewer. 3.2 acres is a problem. I mean, I don't know how you're gonna get 80 units. I mean, that's pretty tight area. I mean, especially with
50.
especially the public water supply, that's gonna be a problem. I mean, you're gonna have, there's limitations as far as 100 radius and 200 radius, and it's based on, how many people are servicing the water during the day. You're putting 50 units in, that's certainly, in my opinion, probably gonna push it to a 200-foot radius. And the limitation's gonna be great. Now,
Yeah.
you can put the water in the back, on another piece of property, we want to pile
Yeah.
it up.
I was just gonna ask, the building would be on the 3.2 acres, but could it well be on the other acres, because it's a 79-acre
Certainly.
property, so. Everything doesn't have to be on 2.2 acres.
Yeah, I guess for me, guys, and this is the way I'm thinking of this project, obviously, there's a lot of interest from the town's perspective to start moving forward towards our 10% goal, right, obviously. And you're doing an exceptional job, and and thank you guys for your help as well. It's hard to get my arms around this entire thing, you know, of where do we go? I mean, to your point, I have the same concerns, but where do we go? How many units do we get? How do we do it? You know, I think the real first good step was the step where we said, how do we want it to look like in the character of the town? And so, you know, I'd love to hear the results of that and see what the results are of that, because I think that's a good way forward. You know, for me, you know, without really seeing it, you know, plotted out on what it would look like and what the impacts would be and how the RFP would go, to your point though, Chris, you know, somebody might have some creative idea that we're not thinking of. It's hard for me to digest. You know, what I'm afraid of is somebody comes back and says, hey, this is what we want to do, and we're going to throw a mega building down there because we can. And next thing you know, we're getting stuck with some mega building proposal down there or whatever else. And,
Or somebody else in town.
or somebody else in town for that matter. So those are the kind of concerns that I have right now that I'm struggling with.
Are we under a specific timeline to meet this 10% guidelines set forth by the state?
No. It's a guideline and it's a goal, and basically, it means that if your town does not have 10% of its housing units as affordable, then you're subject to developers coming in and using 40B to file for a comprehensive permit. If you're over 10%, you can choose whether or not to accept those developments. And if you're making progress towards your goal and have a housing production plan, it's called, it's basically like almost like a vision statement filed with DHCD. If you're making progress and you have that production plan filed, then you can temporarily gain a safe harbor against people coming in with 40Bs if you choose not to accept them.
And that's something we definitely want. You haven't sat through 140B already. That's something we definitely want to move to. 40Bs are not, they're just not developed well.
Hostile ones.
Most of them are hostile. I mean, I've never.
Well, Bill referenced friendly ones before, so we want to make a distinction.
Friendly being us
Yeah,
doing
no,
the-
I understand, but
Generally, they don't end up well, and that's not only the one that ended up amending, but there were several others that I researched at the time that was all going on. And they don't end up well.
Yeah. So steps, I'm sorry, one more question.
So we're currently looking at numbers now that you gave out in addition to what the breakdown is currently population-wise and so forth in the town, and what we have to do to meet the number of units to make it a 10%. So what about other land? Do we know what other percentage of land in town that could potentially be developed by other legitimate developers that increases the amount of homes that now forces us to increase the level of units to meet the 10%?
Do you want to respond to that? Bill? No.
I would say that currently standing, we probably have. I mean, there's the whole commercial development that hasn't been built on yet down off 140 that you could put up. Originally, there was an approved over 55 community for it that had like 200 units built. So now that has been since converted back to commercial lots, but you know, that's one property that could really house a very large affordable units.
But I think the question was, are we anywhere near build-out capacity?
Right, but we have a
Not even close.
Not even close.
You know, that's something also that, you know, build-out analyses were done for most Massachusetts towns back in the early 2000s, and we're having a lot of towns ask us for revisiting those build-out numbers. And obviously, zoning changes have taken place, and so, you know, you could have a completely different set of numbers that could inform, you know, how many units could be built if everything in the zoning was built out. Obviously, infrastructure is going to limit that to an extent, but we're trying to be a little bit more sophisticated with our build-out analyses. We're finishing one up for Holden right now. We're trying to be a little bit more specific in terms of some of the, constraints that are out there, because there are definitely constraints. But, these are proving to be valuable tools for towns to say, hey, maybe we need to rethink our zoning and maybe look a little more closely at where the housing is to be built and how much. So, it's certainly an important contributor to this conversation, because if you, like, for example, Rutland right now, you're working in Rutland right now on a fiscal impact analysis of 400 units that subdivisions have been approved for already, but haven't yet been built. If you multiply that by the average household size, we're talking another 1,200 people, probably 200 school children, and a lot of, they're not prepared for that, but they want to be able to at least know what they're facing. And so, in a town like Mendon, if you had another 400 permitted houses, and all those were market rate houses, absolutely, you're going to have to play catch up from the affordability standpoint.
Go, Bill.
Currently, Mendon right now has approved non-built, well, I think it's 129 lots that I've already approved. There are no houses there yet. So, that's a good measure where we're headed. The limitation of Mendon is not suitable building land, really. It's rock. And so anybody getting into the deep, but you can't take a map and say, they can put a development here. You'd have to do some real geology stuff to determine, because most of Mendon is ledge. And a lot of times now, with the rising cost of road, most people are just looking to buy property and put a road, what already is road front, and making larger lots out of it. They'll put a house on a 5-acre lot instead of moving, putting a road in additional development. In some cases, we've seen through the handwriting what's the byline wrote? I'm drawing a blank. Like Alfonso.
Open space
The
development?
open space, yeah. Yeah, we're seeing more of that now. So the open space developments will, might achieve a little more building, but that's about the only way to be able to develop in the future. Run real simple.
Tom?
I just, talking about reaching our 10% goal, going forward, it might be advantageous to look into some mixed-use development, some possible commercial development with some affordable housing, maybe on top of these commercial buildings. So we kind of take up two birds with one stone.
So, we got about 10 minutes left. What are our next steps, Bill, to move forward? I just want to make sure that we're all clear on the goals and objectives moving forward, so we can take it to the next step.
Well, we need to determine some of the direction for writing up this RFP. And that would entail deciding whether we're going to pursue an ownership scenario or a rental scenario. And then, like I said, whether there's a pathway to develop this without going with a friendly 40B, or whether we need to go with a 40B. I really would like to think that we can provide the pathway, because that would just be a lot nicer for the town to.
Okay, so those are the two questions we have to answer. I know for my part, to make a decision on either one of those questions, I'd want to see some kind of fact sheet, list of pros and cons for each, whatever. I mean, I don't think that I've heard enough information in this meeting to make an intelligent choice.
Yeah. Right. Me as well, and that's what I was kind of getting to earlier.
I would rely on, planning board, Board of Health, to basically tell us what's possible, whether those allowances can be made before we can even really get them.
without seeing anything in place, I mean, we just have to determine what we're willing to do with that property. The suggestion of moving the well off to, I mean, we own how many acres there?
Yeah.
You can certainly move the well off. Probably move the septic off if you wanted to. That would certainly make it more feasible to put something on 3.2 acres. I just, like I said, thinking out of the box, and Tom just mentioned something, previous speaker just mentioned something. And I've seen a lot of them lately, is these affordable units over commercial space. Well, maybe that's something that would be more attractive if we did some type of, we've been working on a village design for years. Maybe that's an attractive piece for the corner. Where the low levels all commercial and the upper levels all affordable, or,
I'd just like to say that the minute I heard such ideas about the property up here, I was really excited about it. I could easily envision having a mixed-use development. I hope I'm choosing the right words here, but I'm not saying we should pursue this just because we're down the road a ways on it, but I do see this as an ideal location with proximity to the senior center. We had talked before about sort of making that a node, I guess you would say, to develop some commerce down there, possible tie-in later to transit. So I think, there's a learning curve going on here. If we get a winning project on a small scale and it's financially viable, that could be really nice down there. I'm not saying those are reasons for sticking with this and not abandoning it for something bigger, but it seems like we're on the cusp of really making something happen down there. And if we could get a safe harbor out of it, then we can pursue our wildest dreams up.
maybe Chris can help me with this, but the scope of crossing that river and doing something, because obviously the land on the other side is more substantial.
Agreed.
The only thing I'd be concerned on the other side is grade. But sometimes grade in residential development helps you, because it allows access from the lower, and then you can grade up to the upper and allow access to units from up top. And sometimes you can build into the grade on residential. You can't really do that on commercial. So that's, I would definitely research that out. That would give you plenty of space, be nice hidden. You wouldn't even really have to worry about it. You could do some type of parkway on the way in. These are the things I'm talking about. And it's probably going to be more, other than what the cost of the river crossing would be, which would have to be determined. This might be a more attractive approach.
Financially.
Than someone coming in here and doing an RFP on, 3.2 acres and dealing with all these zoning issues and all this other stuff. They may be willing, there'd probably be more interest on if that crossing can be done reasonably. I know other people are crossing rivers, so it's got to be an opportunity. But I can't imagine how many housing units you could put on the other side.
And I just wanted to say that I think if we can answer these sort of really high-level questions that we're looking at, what we really want to be able to do is to create an RFP that will open the door to invite developers to come in and start offering their ideas for what can be done with that property. Because obviously, we're not going to be able to envision all the potential scenarios in a single RFP. And so knowing in broad senses, if the town wants it to be rentals, if you'd prefer it to be sold, if you'd prefer it to be what the process is going to be, then we can get that RFP in position and we can try to get some really inventive ideas from the developer community.
Can I throw something out there? I actually just said it to Ron a few seconds ago, but it's my last point. And it just struck me that a lot of the things that we've been hearing about the different options, going broader, different locations, why not invite some really high-end quality developers and do a focus group and talk to them about their first impressions of this site? What do they think the possibilities are? What do they think the obstacles are? Gather that information and research that.
And not just the 3-acre level,
Right.
but at the whole
The whole
78
thing.
acres and see what they think.
Absolutely. You can say, we could look at the small site, we could look at the large site, but what is your impression, developers? We can find some really high-quality developers that have done some fantastic, like, for example, Concord Riverwalk, or Pine Hills, or something like that, and just get them together in a room for an hour, buy them pizza or whatever, and say, just give us your first impression. They'll come if they think there's a potential opportunity there. So it's just something to think about. It might be that extra bit of information that might really kind of break the logjam. So.
I've actually got a list of a bunch of those guys. They run the project management level instead of, the development themselves. That they could ask. Those are the guys that really know how to bring out a project.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the contractor themselves, but the guy who oversees the project and really represents the town. So those are the guys you want in the room.
So clearly there's a lot to think about on this. And, we're just running out of time now, but I think that this was really helpful for me. Yeah, I was going to say, suggest, we need to start really kind of formulating a plan and, how do we move to next steps before we can even go to an RFP. I agree with my colleague here, or my colleagues, that we're definitely going to need a lot more information before we even send it out to RFP. So we can percolate on our end and figure out what we need from you, Bill. And you can work with the folks on CMRPC, as well as Mr. Ambrosino and the planning board, and we can start pulling this together. I think that's probably the best approach.
Now, obviously, you leave some number of questions open for people to bid differently on RFPs, right?
Yeah.
But you asked 2 specific questions tonight. Can I assume that you never go to RFP without knowing the answers to those 2? Is that kind of the impression I've got out of this conversation? Is that right?
I don't know if I would say you never do. I haven't seen any examples where those 2 questions weren't answered, at least in general terms.
I got it.
Especially the how you overcome the variance part, because it's like what I've been getting from what we've been looking at is that's going to be a non-starter for a lot of companies if they're going to look and see it's zoned for single-family housing and you want multifamily housing.
So suppose
you got to tell me how we're going to get over that.
So suppose the 3 of us said tonight, we know exactly the answers to those 2 questions. It's going to be rental, and we don't want to invoke friendly 40.
No, we want to do friendly.
I'm just making up a making up a scenario, right? It doesn't even matter. Just making up a story. So then, would you be walking away saying, "Okay, I'm ready to write an RFP"?
I think so. Yes, we would be, because we have it in position where it's about 40 or 50% there, but we have the large questions that we have a couple of those very large approaches that have to be answered.
I'd throw a caveat into that. I'd say with those 2 answers, you're going to need a zoning solution. In the friendly 40B scenario, essentially, the town is willing to be flexible and suspend zoning reality. But not to do that, my suggestion would be to think about a new district, an overlay, or something else that would provide the build-out that you're hoping to get. I think existing setbacks, existing densities, existing heights, possibly, not necessarily, but I'm just trying to say all the dimensional stuff needs to be in play.
Okay. So to get there in the near term, the best we could get would be agreement in principle.
To be honest with you, and we started this down in the corner once before, and zoning tends to be a non-starter for a big company. They don't want to come in and mess around with huge zoning issues. Especially small towns have this reputation of not being, amendable.
So are you saying that that agreement in principle wouldn't be enough? We'd actually have to change some zoning so that they know dead to rights?
Because I'll tell you what, we've been working on a village district bylaw that extends from the corner down all the way to Providence Road. Something I had mapped out in my head a long several years back. And probably 60% of that is written. We obviously have to clean it up from a zoning level, but, I mean, by the time this went through the process, we probably could have something on town floor, and as long as it was acceptable to the people of the town, that's when you find out whether they want affordable housing or not.
Okay, but see, I'm still a little confused by that. I'm sorry to spend more time on that, but I just want to be clear on what we're walking away with here. So based upon what you said, it sounded to me like the closeout of what you said makes it sound like you get the agreement in principle, you start down a path, and that by the time you finish with that path, somebody's responded to the RFP.
And they may be able to help us with, whoever's coming in, may be able to help us with the.
Okay, so that means for them to go, okay, if that's true, then for them to go to RFP, we just need agreement in principle, where you're going. What you might agree to.
Yeah, I think there's risk.
Guarantees
Yeah, there's risk there.
Well, that's the difference between agreement in principle and guarantee, I get that.
But because, I'm not gonna get it, we have a zoning bylaw that needs to cross town floor, and ultimately, the people, we answer to the people, so the people make that.
No, I get that.
Yeah, so I'm gonna, for the sake of time, I'm gonna entertain two more questions.
Alan's been trying.
And then, and then we'll wrap it up. So Alan, what do you got?
Alan Greenberg, Board of Health. From everything that I've heard tonight, the things that sounded the most sensible is it Chris? The idea of bringing some people in that are developers that build these type of projects, and just saying, listen to them, if I understood you correctly, we have this parcel of land. What could you do with it? We're anxious to do something with it along the lines of affordable housing. Tell us. That already shows that as a town, whether or not we have the correct zoning right now or whatever, we're willing to work with someone. And they're the ones that do it and do it for a living. They're the best ones, and that's the best thing that I've heard tonight, is to bring them into a meeting and entertain them and say, hey, listen, we're willing, what can we do with this?
Yeah.
Because until we get engineering results, Board of Health really can't tell you what we can do or can't do down there. So the engineering results are still pending. But that really sounded sensible to this whole thing. And it's very possible they may say, well, you have other parcels of land in town that are better suited.
Mr. Morali?
The question I had was if we use the term friendly 40B, and the 40B statute allows the developer, or whoever the 40B developer is, to complete it in spite of the local zoning laws, then do we really even need to have that zoning law piece answered if it's a 40B? Because isn't the whole threat of 40B that someone can come in and bypass all of the local zoning laws and do what they want to do?
Well, they can't,
Not
they
necessarily.
can't bypass mine, throw them all.
No, not all of them, not all of them, but
The
my,
risk you run with that, Mike, when the town does it, is the townspeople aren't satisfied with that.
Right.
I get the answer to that, Billy, but what I'm getting at is the whole discussion of what comes first, the chicken and the egg. You need to come up with a plan, but then you need to come up with zoning changes. And rather than permanently changing all the zoning things to let other people come in and do the same thing, can't you come up with a certain set of parameters for this particular project? Because 40B allows you to do that, and you kind of pick your poison and navigate this without changing the zoning laws permanently for everything else.
We need to pass variance.
Could I address that? I think the simplification of a friendly 40B is that you really don't have to deal with town meeting and two-thirds majority and all those complicating factors. The potential downside is that if you enter into a friendly 40B discussion, it's going to be a negotiation. And there's going to have to be some give and take on both sides. And some of that give and take ultimately you may not be able to come to a culmination of a negotiated agreement with a friendly 40B developer. They could just step away and say, well, you know what? I still think this site has viability, but I'm not going to be able to come into an agreement with the town. I'm going to make it an unfriendly 40B because I've already determined that it's viable. That could happen. And, you know, to me, if you have the possibility of mimicking the, you know, DHCD guidelines, getting everything that you need for affordability, but not go down that route, I think you'd be better off doing it the old-fashioned way, getting buy-in from the citizens, selling the zoning on its merits. That's my opinion.
Okay, so I want to wrap this up because we do have another meeting we got to get to, but
Well, I can get with Bill and Cam, and we can get some people together and start this discussion.
yeah, okay. You know, it's a real important discussion, as you can tell, for our community, and I think that's fantastic. I love the interest tonight. I think it's fantastic, the amount of folks that we had from the various boards and committees here tonight. Clearly, we want to make the right decision for our community. You know, as a board member myself, I'm still trying to get my head around it. Obviously need to spend some more time with you, Bill, as well as maybe you two gentlemen, and really trying to understand the options. And you from a planning perspective, Bill, on really understanding, you know, all the moving pieces. And I'm sure we're going to have more meetings about this. In respect to the RFP, I'm not sure yet. I'm not willing to make any decisions on the RFP until I have more information. Clearly, you know, because you asked us, you know, do we rent, do we own? I haven't seen any statistics on any of that yet, so I don't know what what that teases out to be. I think, Rich, that was one of your concerns. You wanted to make sure that you had more information on that.
You talked about a fact sheet, and I think that might be a beneficial thing to develop for you guys,
Yeah.
to show, you know, what are the pros and cons of each.
Yeah.
And I think that we could probably have something like that for you next time.
Yeah, I think that'll be perfect, and then we'll just schedule another meeting. Kim, you agree with that? We'll schedule another meeting, we'll go through this and go from there. Guys, what do you, any
Sounds
questions,
good.
Mark?
Oh, I'm good with that.
I just would add one more thing. I'm still slightly confused about what the process, we don't have to clear it up right now, but I think I'd like to see an A, B, C, D, E on how we get from here to there, because it's unclear to me right now.
Yeah, I was trying to get that out. I was still a little confused myself. I know a couple of the questions that need to be answered, but it sounds like there was, based on some of the discussion tonight, you know, there's some other opportunities possibly in the community. How do we steer towards those directions and ultimately make a good
Well, I
decision?
think it makes
So-
eminent sense to take Chris's suggestion and tap into the wisdom and
Yep.
experience of developers and find out, you know.
That's just one
if we-
piece,
If
though.
we're at the right scale.
Yeah,
Right,
but-
and then come back to this same type of forum. Now we're armed with more information. We can present some of the same questions and move forward.
Does it help you out, Rich?
And I'd be happy to share with the board the notes that I had brought tonight, and we'll be happy to go through and try to consolidate more of our notes so that you guys can be provided with those fact sheets. Because we've got his notes, we've got our notes, we just need to pull them together and be able to send them to you guys so that you can have the opportunity to review them.
All right, fantastic.
But that's not what I'm asking for, though. I get, that's only one piece, right? You don't have to answer the question now, so you don't need to respond. I'm just saying that it's unclear to me right now how we get from where we are right now to release of RFP. I heard we kind of did a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of that, and I don't see the straight line.
Okay.
That's all. You don't have to answer now. Just get it, put together what you think.
That's why it's laid out a little better on my notes.
It's okay,
so
you
that's
can
why
answer
I
it- you can answer it later.
Consolidate them and get them to you guys.
All right, great. All right, so thank you very much for everybody for the discussion. Thank you very much for the folks from the various boards and committees that showed up. We are going to have an agenda item just for the folks on the appointed boards. This evening, we're going to be talking about appointment of open positions and how they impact the boards and committees. If you're interested, stick around. If you're not interested, have a great night. Okay? With that being said,
If I could, I just want to thank people here in this room and also anybody watching on video. Please come at us with your suggestions, your comments, your concerns. It's all about, listening to all the constituents, and I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
all right, great, thank you very much. So now we're going to open up our regular Board of Selectmen's meeting of November 20th, 2017.
Unless they want to.
We'll let some folks clear out real quick. One second.
I smacked my knuckle.
I heard it. I heard it from here.
God, that hurt.
Okay.
It's not a lot of
All there is minutes, nothing.
No agenda, though.
All right, so,
Yes.
to our regularly scheduled Board of Selectmen's meeting, November 20th, 2017. We did not do an opening pledge yet, so let's do an opening pledge real quick. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I guess I could have done it on the last one, but since it's our regular scheduled board meeting, we'll just do it now. Let's see, citizen statements and petitions. Seeing none, hearing none. Correspondence to the board, none?
So I would like to squeeze in something quick if I could on that topic. Sure. If you don't mind. So just wanted to say that I went to Buddy Lowell's retirement party on Saturday. It was awesome. You were able to organize, Mark, those two citations from the state and House of Representatives. It was a lot of fun. They ended up with more people, way more people than they expected. They had to pull in more chairs and stuff because they ended up with more people than they were expected. So it was a nice turnout. And we made Buddy Lowell honorary fire chief of the day. So it was really nice, a nice send-off for Buddy, 50 years. So anybody that sees him, talks to him or whatever, congratulate him on 50 years of service to the town of Mendon.
That's excellent. Yeah, congratulations, Buddy. All right, adoption and release of previous meeting minutes was on the agenda. Most of them we've already covered. One executive session meeting minutes, still haven't had response back from our council, so we're going to hold on that one.
Okay, same reason we delayed
Yep.
last time, right?
Yep.
Okay, all right.
Yep. So there's one, it looks like one regular session meeting minute, 10/16/17. Take a motion for that.
I move to approve the adoption of regular session meeting minutes for 10/16/17.
Second,
Any discussion on that?
I'm going to say I didn't read those yet, so I'm going to abstain from the vote.
That's what happened last time.
What's that?
This is what
Chris
happened
didn't
last
read them last time.
What does it matter? As long as you get two people that read them.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to give you the opportunity to read over them. Why don't we just push them out one more week? Because it's pretty
It's not
important.
gonna hurt.
It's not
Okay.
gonna hurt. So, all right.
Yeah.
Very
I just couldn't get to it today.
All right.
It's fine.
All right, so, Kim? So,
Withdraw the motion,
withdraw the motion for now, or just put it on hold.
right?
Consider the boards and committees policy.
Okay, do we have I assume we have a printout of the latest version here, right?
Here, I'm gonna hand some out too,
Oh, okay.
to the remaining. It's 3 there.
Danka? Draft.
Sorry.
We won't mistake it for the actual policy.
I guess, yeah. That's a pretty big watermark.
I just want to make sure everybody's
That
aware.
is clear now.
Next time, could you make it the one that does the angle?
I certainly
the
can.
angle ones better.
I kind of mess around with that. It's a little different every time.
You know, you're delaying us, so I'm gonna hold that on you.
Why, I'm just having water.
All right, go ahead, Kim.
What? Sorry, I can't hear it. Oh, do you hear this echo in here? It sounds really strange.
I don't hear it from here.
Oh, it's
So
like, it's
we can hear it on
very,
this side.
very strange. Like I can barely hear what you're saying, and then it like reverberates around. It's very odd.
Nobody ever says that to me.
That's true. That's true. Okay, so this is the latest version of the policy with your edits from the previous meeting. It probably would be beneficial to just go through it and read it for those at home, since this is close. I don't know if one of you would like to do that. That would be nice. Or not.
Would you like me to read it?
If you'd like to. Mrs. Schofield.
Mark usually does a great job at reading things.
He does, actually.
Yes,
I
he
think I'm going to
does.
defer to him.
You
Absolutely.
want me to just read it?
I
Just
do,
read it,
because
yeah.
there may be people watching at home who might be interested
And then we
in-
can absorb it both all
All
together.
right, I'll read a story here.
I'm gonna tell them to be quiet.
Kim needs a gavel, too. Okay, so this is the town boards and committees appointments policy and procedures. The purpose of this policy is to set forth the guidelines to be followed when assisting the Board of Selectmen to select and appoint citizen volunteers to the various boards and committees for which the board is the appointing authority. The board wishes to encourage and broaden participation in town government with qualified, interested, and motivated residents. Applicability, this policy applies to all appointments for which the Board of Selectmen is the appointing authority. The policy appointing process: when a vacancy or reappointment occurs on a board or commission, the Board or Commission will notify the Board of Selectmen and the town clerk. The Board of Selectmen may solicit for candidates via print news, email, website, social media, or word of mouth. All vacancies will have an advertisement period of not less than 45 days to allow for time for other interested parties time to, there's something there.
Yeah. My
To sub-
grammar's messy there.
That's all right. To submit letters of interest. The selectmen reserve the right to extend the advertisement period at their discretion. Candidates for reappointment must also submit letters of interest. When a letter of interest is received by any party, the letter will be immediately forwarded to the office of the town clerk, who will onward notify the applicable interested town entities and the Board of Selectmen. It is desired but not mandatory for a board or committee to interview all declared candidates for a vacancy and provide to the Board of Selectmen their recommendation as to the best candidate to fill the position. Okay.
Make another mistake.
No, I was just thinking about that for a minute. It should be. Wow.
Did anybody proofread my document here?
Mr. Grammar.
Sorry.
It should be expected that the Board of Selectmen will interview all declared candidates before making their decision. The Board of Selectmen will place the possible appointment of candidates on the next available Board of Selectmen's meeting agenda after the expiration of the advertisement period. The candidate for consideration must be in attendance to be appointed or reappointed. The chairperson of the Board or Commission being discussed and its members will be invited to attend that meeting to provide input. Attendance of the board or committee is not required, but highly encouraged for the appointment to be considered. The Board of Selectmen vote on the appointments and selection criteria will include but not be limited to the following: applicable work-related or life experience level, previous municipal experience, motivation level and energy, why they want to service.
See, now you knew that was wrong, and you just said it wrong, just to...
Just saying.
Yeah,
Just
okay.
saying. Mr. Grammar. How new the candidate is to serving in Mendon, ability to communicate, ability to invest the required time to service.
To serve, yeah.
Mr. Schofield, you're...
Recommendation by the board or committee. Applicants not chosen for the vacant position will be sent a letter thanking them for their interest. Vacancy notification, the chairman of a town body shall notify in writing. Email correspondence is acceptable. The Board of Selectmen of any vacancy. Vacancy should be reported to the Board of Selectmen as soon as they occur. Now, okay, resignations. All resignations must be in writing and submitted or forwarded to the town clerk, who will onward notify the applicable interested town entities and the Board of Selectmen. Resignation letters will be placed on the next upcoming Board of Selectmen's meeting for a formal vote to accept the member's resignation.
Now, I'll say right up front, I don't know, I think my recollections and my notes on what we had discussed last time were pretty close, but I can't say for 1,000% I got it all right. I think I did, but anyway. Clearly didn't do so well on my grammar. Forgot to hit F7, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think this was pretty much what we had talked about.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yes.
Yep.
I mean, if you guys are happy with it, I'm...
Well, I think it's about time we to accept this.
Yeah, me too. And you know, motion to accept with grammatical errors corrected.
Do I have a second?
So moved, second.
All right. Any further discussion on it?
I don't think so.
Nope.
No, I'm good.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right,
Excellent.
there it is.
Great.
We now have a policy.
Whew,
And
about time.
clearly, the purpose of this is to put some formality to the plethora of open positions that we have. And we look forward to anybody that's listening and is looking to volunteer, to please look at all the available positions that we have and come help your town out, so.
I think we need to act on an appointment at our next meeting.
Oh, definitely.
For
We have a-
conservation, now that we've done this.
We have a number of appointments that have been pending during this time period, so we will get them forward following the guidelines.
So we were queuing up some candidates while we're waiting to finish this?
It's about 30 days or so, yeah. We have a number of people interested in serving on committees.
Yeah, okay, so that's great. I would say that now this is approved, we'll fix the grammar in it and get it emailed out to all the boards and committee chairs so they understand and suggest that they review it and understand it, and also give the positions that we're now appointing, or we're going to be appointing at our next meeting or whenever we put them on the agenda. The chairman the opportunity to be able to come and speak on it as well. All right. Any further discussion on that?
Nope. Good. Yep.
All right. All right, so that's it. So we got that accepted. So moving on, consider dispatch agreement with Millville.
We are currently printing some agreements.
Okay.
Thank you. Which page is the section on that was up for,
Last page.
Probably the last page.
that was an issue last time?
Last page in the attachment.
Depends on how I print it. It was looking really,
Section 2.
You know what, I don't like it. No, I'm kidding.
So just a few changes. There was some word changes that we were concerned about the last time that we met on this. The chief and I Chief had conversations with Millville, as well as town council. The chief and I also had a conversation with the state regarding the process for the C91 grant. That conversation went very well with them. Understand that process extremely well in respect to any risk that may be put upon us, which was one of our concerns when we first discussed this. When we first had discussed this, we had talked about possibly having Millville, contribute some money in the event that the grant went away, et cetera, because there was no real formality in the contract. So the way the process works is the way that the 911 grant is funded through the cell phone program, and it would have to go through legislation before it could be taken away from us. So it would have to, go through a bunch of hoops in order for this grant to be removed. And as a matter of fact, I was also informed that there could be further opportunity to raise more money in this if we were to go after the state police cell phone 911 calls, et cetera. So the chief said he was going to look into that. Right, Chief?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the only other thing that we did is I wanted to make sure that we had a severability verbiage in there because we didn't have any severability or hold harmless wording in there. We worked with town council on that, and we do have some verbiage in there that basically states that we should not be held liable for not providing such services after such expiration, and that would be in the event if an expiration were to be happen, and we don't anticipate that that expiration would happen, so, okay. Did I get it all, Chief?
Yeah, I think that covers it all.
So I don't know if you guys have any more questions on that, or if it addresses all of your concerns. I'm pretty comfortable with this now that I've spent some time with the chief, town council, as well as the state on this, and I'm pretty comfortable with the language now, so.
I'm good.
Okay, I'll take a motion then.
I move to enter into a dispatch agreement with the town of Millville.
Doesn't that motion have to say, reference this specific document? It's kind of vague, but anyway, second.
Want me to read what this says here?
Yeah, why don't you just include that in there, Mark?
I move to enter into a intermunicipal agreement for regional dispatch services between the town of Mendon and Millville.
To go from when to when?
From
2017.
2017 to
November
2022?
1st, 2017.
2022.
Yep, November 1st.
November 1st, 2017 through November 1st of 2022?
21, right?
7 plus 5 is
21.
22, right? 17 plus 5 is 22, right? It's a 5-year agreement.
Yep, 21.
Yeah, okay, 22.
Okay.
Second?
All right, any further discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Just want to say thank you very much to the chief and Ms. Newman. You guys have worked really hard on this contract. I really appreciate it. Also look forward to partnering with Millville for another 5 years on this and beyond. So I think this is a great contract. All right?
And we already have agreement from Millville on this language too, so this is, okay.
Yes. And then, so we probably could do this tomorrow because town council's going to be here. I think we need 4 copies, and then the chairman will sign it, and town council will sign it.
Okay.
So she'll be here tomorrow.
Okay, so you will pull that together, Laura.
That reminds me, Mr. Chairman, I forgot to bring it tonight, I'll bring it tomorrow, but I need everybody to sign Buddy Lowell's citation we made for him, so I'll bring that with me tomorrow night.
Perfect. Okay. Okay. All right, so other topics not reasonably anticipated 48 hours prior to meeting.
Yeah, I think we have to just make sure that we're happy to, that we're not going to be using the excess levy.
The 117
Is it 117 or is it 167 now?
with the 50.
Okay, well, where do we come down on the 50? Because I left town hall earlier today thinking one thing, and then, so where are we at?
Bond council's opinion is that we don't have to actually recognize the $50,000 if we don't want to. But if it's easier for the process for the town just to do so, which is the conversation that you've had, right, with the assessor and the town clerk, then that's fine as well. I don't think it makes a significant difference either way at this point, because $50,000 equals, what, 6 cents? That's what you said. So
Let me explain that. So as of right now, if we have to raise the 50,000, which we had planned to, and the piece that was unknown at the time was the additional assessor's overlay, 50,000. That 50,000 adds 6 cents to the tax rate, right? Now, it still is going down like we promised the people of Mendon. It's going from 1775 down to 1696. But it would go down to 1690 if we don't have to raise this other 50. That was what we were trying to achieve, right? So since the assessors need 50,000 of overlay we didn't expect, it accomplishes the same goal that we wanted to raise the other 54 that we put in Article 27. So theoretically, we wouldn't have to raise it, but because we voted it, we have to still raise it. So that's what we were trying to determine today, is whether we really still had to raise it or not. And it turns out it's a big, complicated, convoluted thing, and the cleanest thing to do is to just raise it and buy down the debt as we plan to do in the first place.
Okay.
So, the question at hand is, right, we weren't planning on, in this special town meeting, appropriating any of the excess levy that we have, right? Because that was, the whole idea is we were keeping the tax rate down as low as possible, and it's
That's right.
117.
That's right.
We made that headroom over the last couple of years.
Right.
Okay, so we can tell the assessor that's what we're doing.
All right, anything else? Okay, let's see, executive session, purpose 3 for executive session. I don't have a motion here.
Oh, you don't? Is it right here? Oh, okay.
So I move to enter into executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation, if in an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on bargaining or litigation position of the public body, and the chair so declares, fire union. We will reconvene in regular session only to adjourn. A roll call vote is needed. Burke?
Second. Oh,
Sorry, good. Second. So Schofield, second. So Burke, aye?
Schofield, aye?
Real eye.
All right, thank you very much, everybody.
Really?
There you go, Mark.
Well, it's better than kicking ahead, yeah.
That was done back in May.
Yeah.
Really planned before that, before we even really.
We can use it for design
But
services.
that was in debate at the same time as the money for the 350th,